inside? No. Melted ice cream.
I'm gonna make sure I know what's
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Rose. I'm Dean of the Law School. I would like to welcome you to the 2024 Schroeder Lecture. We have a fantastic, distinguished lecturer here tonight, and I will turn it over to our co-director of the Law Medicine Center, Professor Max Mellman, to introduce him.
So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 2024 Schroeder Lecture. This lecture is named for Oliver Schroeder, who joined the faculty of what was then the Western Reserve Law School in 1948, and in 1953 founded the Law Medicine Center, the first law school program in health law in the country. When he retired in 1986, the Schroeder Lectureship was endowed in his honor. And by the terms of the charter, the Schroeder lecturer is selected on the basis of scholarly distinction and contribution in the areas of health policy and law. Our 2024 Schroeder lecturer is Dr. Stuart Bussey. Dr. Bussey is a physician and an attorney. He received a BA from Dartmouth in psychology and math, a master's in human development from the University of Chicago, an MD from Loyola University in Chicago in 1978, and a JD from Golden Gate University. He is a board-certified family practitioner, a flight surgeon and aviation medical examiner, a consultant to the state of California on Social Security disability claims, a fellow of the American College of Legal Medicine, and since 2006, president of the Union of American Physicians and Dentists, which was founded in 1972. Dr. Bussey's presentation today is entitled Physician Unions in the Medical Industrial Revolution. And please welcome Dr. Bussey.
Drop there. Okay. One back here. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Millman, and thank Case Western and Paul and Dean and everyone here that graciously invited me to speak for the Oliver Schroeder lecture. Scholarly, not really. Work and involved in healthcare, yes, I am. I refer you to those pictures up there on the top and the bottom here. And I've watched since the golden age of medicine, which you may or may not remember. I remember it in the 70s and 80s, but I think the two groups are converging. We have the white coats, we have the blue collar down in the construction. The blue collar is for protective. I thought often of putting a blue collar on a white coat, still might do that. It seems, the wages are converging, the hours are difficult. Doctors don't understand. In fact, one of my urologist friends, he was back on a Saturday at his house, his pipe broke, and he called a plumber over to the house, and the plumber fixed it, charged him $350 for 15 minutes. And my friend said, what the heck is going on here? I went 12 years to school. I do pipes too, only I do it in human beings, and I get sued, and you don't. What's wrong here? He says, yeah, I feel the same way you. That's why I switched from being a urologist to a plumber. So, okay. I got a lot of colorful pictures. This one, I was in the Peace Corps. You didn't mention that, but that made me think a lot about my just direction and flexibility in your life. This Lao Tzu dude was the author of the Tao Te Ching, which is 500 BC, and he had a lot of pithy phrases. I think it was the one step starts the 1,000-mile journey. That might have been him. Flexibility, but this one is applicable to everyone here. In law school and medical school, if you don't change direction, you're going to wind up where you're heading. So I didn't have any direction in high school, I didn't have any professional models. I was good at math, though. So I went to Dartmouth. Had a software career in front of me. And who remembers the punch cards? Do you remember the punch cards? Mrs. Millman remembers the punch cards. Okay, well, the punch cards, you spend hours doing it. And I was exhausted. I was walking down the ice, and I slipped when I was 20 years old, and all these punch cards went up. All these hours of work went down the drain, and that was one of the nodes about changing directions. I went into psychology and did rat operant condition in a Skinner box for 2 years. And after they bit me 15 or 20 times, I decided to go change another direction. So I went to the Peace Corps for a while and came back, went to university and did human development. They said, you should be a professor, and I just didn't have it in me, sorry. I'm not the professorial type, so I opened an Indian restaurant. I took other jobs. I was in the Teamsters, drove a truck, was in the Chicago Teachers Union. I got a check for 38 years later, by the way, for $40 from the Chicago Teachers Union. I thought that was so cool. And then I wound up working at a halfway house as an activity director, where I met a couple doctors who convinced me to apply to medical school. Went to medical school at Loyola, became a family doctor, which I thought was the right thing for me. Moved to California and got involved in hospital politics. It's a little long-winded. My point is about the direction, how I got to be the union president. And then I made some enemies there. As you know, in politics and medicine or law, you have to, rub sharp elbows. And so anyway, they sort of dismissed me from one of the HMOs. And my jurors were my competitors, the people who stood to gain from my patients. And I said, something's wrong here. So I went to Golden Gate Law School, got the degree, did some consulting, and was late for work, of course, so I got in trouble. Went across the street to the Union of American Physicians and Dentists, and that's how I got to be president. So, a long-winded thing. The other part of my tale was, if you don't change direction for the other doctors who have a straight and narrow course, you get taken over by managed care, which has happened, of course. That's the point of the speech, is doctors have to fight back and take control of their profession. First, I want to ask you, though, what's labor? The definition of labor in the dictionary is the mental or physical effort by human beings to create goods and services. And so up there in the pyramid thing, I didn't know that, but you see the guy with a whip. It seems that they're not having a good time pulling that limestone block up Giza, But it turns out they're not slaves. They were paid laborers. And, I went and started looking into what slavery is. To make my point about, how people feel they're exploited, right? Slavery is 11,000 years old, and, Sumerians, Egyptians, they all had reasons to take people, abandoned children, people from enslaved families, criminals, war criminals, and make them slaves. And, it's still going on over this world, different forms of slavery. Up in the United States had its episode. You could argue it still does. But, that's manual labor. My point of this is manual and mental labor. That's the definition. So you see up on the upper right, you have the craftsmen, the bootsmen, the cigar makers, the candle makers who used their brain and manual labor. The doctor down on the left who used to be acupuncturists, osteopaths, used to have both manual and physical. And lawyers, well, I don't know what you do here for manual labor, but I think back in the medieval times, they were kind of tough. They, go to the court of equity or bodyguards or something like that. And, they've all morphed into what's on the right, which is all virtual labor now. I don't know if you can say it's human beings. Roofers now, for my roof, are taking drones up to see what's on the roof. They don't get up on the roof. Pilots are worried about getting replaced, and the virtual world is upon us. Let me see if I can do that. So, labor, what did they have? Back in 11th, I'm giving you a little history before I get into unions, but 11th to 16th century, we had guilds. And guilds were places where you could, learn your craft, get educated, and, get apprenticeships. So guilds worked for a while, but they became very select, like a fraternity, almost like a mafia. You didn't get the apprenticeship you thought you were going to get. They were not democratic organizations. So they sort of fizzled out. And associations in the last 200 or 300 years became the ABA, the AMA, realtors all, pushed the scope of their profession, the reputation, education, networking is really important in any sort of association, and political influences as well. But that doesn't take care of the individual workers. And the individual workers, I don't know if anyone has ever had the wonderful experience of getting fired, but I have. And it really is a shock. A couple of times I got fired, one from a shipping clerk, the other one when I started out, because two people were vying for, I didn't know that, but 2 people were vying for the same jobs, and I didn't do enough surgery to make it worth my while. So it's a bad feeling, and you don't want to get to that point. You don't want to get fired. You want a happy life. So, you know, that's why labor unions were formed in the 200 or 300 years ago in the late 18th century. There are different unions, manufacturing unions, craft unions. The labor unions didn't have any legal backing back then. A few states had labor laws, but mostly they were considered sort of criminal enterprises for collective bargaining and restraints of trade. And so the organizations that employed workers easily put injunctions on them. They would not allow them to strike. And that's why I had all the violence in the 1900s. But, you know, they were taking their life in their hands, and people paid for it with their life with these strikes. I don't know if you can see this very well, but rise of the factories. What I want to point out is for every one of these industrial revolutions we've had in our country, which is, the definition for me is when you have a new technology that satisfies a demand, a rising demand. Back in 1760, there were like 2 or 3 million Americans, and by I looked it up, in 1800 there were 5 million people. They all a lot of them migrated from their farms over to the cities where the machines were waiting. The textile mills in New Hampshire were waiting for them, and all the transportation, the carriage industry, and they were now subservient to machines, sort of like what the doctors are experiencing now with the changes in the 1950s, go from your office to the hospital, working on all these machines, robotic surgeries, and you know, you have to deal with the machine who's you know, your competitor possibly. The machine helps you, but he's also, you know, could make you obsolescent. So what do you do when the machine, a textile machine or a loom is running 15 hours a day? You have to get the cheapest labor you can have. Up there on the right, you see a 12-year-old boy who could work 12 hours a day for just about nothing. And so it wasn't until England passed these factory acts and these child mining acts that they allowed kids from 10 to 13 to work 48 hours a week. So, I mean, things were pretty bad. And other countries do that. I was in China 30 years ago when I saw a kid pulling this really heavy carriage, and the Chinese guard just took my camera and broke it. I mean, this goes on all over the world. It goes on in the United States, but luckily we have a lot of labor reforms that other countries don't have. So we have also technology resistant, the Luddites. You may have known the Luddites. Fred Luddite was a textile worker in the 1700s, and he got so fed up. He didn't like the clothing that came out, and it was mostly he didn't like having his job threatened. So he broke the machines, and voila, Luddite was born. And Luddite now means aversion to technology. And I don't know how many Luddites are out there. I'm kind of a Luddite myself, even though I started out in technology. So the Luddites were against them. The agricultural revolution was also there, the Captain Swing riots. And the trade unions lurched on through the 1900s, not sanctioned by many, no federal sanction at all, just the states. So that's the first part of the 1800s. Second part is the assembly line, right? And this fellow named Frederick Taylor, have you ever heard of Taylorism? Frederick Taylor was a young man in Philadelphia. Grew up on the main line, very ritzy family. And his father said, Fred, I got an internship with you at Bethlehem Steel this summer. So Fred went there and says, I want you to take notes. So Fred took notes. He looked at what everyone's doing. You know, first make coke, and then you melt the iron, you extract the iron, and then you melt it, and you form the iron. So all these things to make steel, Fred studied and dissected these tasks, and then he assigned people to train them, basically. So you see what old Fred's doing. He's giving them instructions, supervision, and now you've got a middle manager. And so the father of middle management is Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor was hired by Henry Ford shortly, after that, and middle management was born. And obviously, it has a huge, repercussions for the doctors in these HMOs. And when I was starting out, having people tell me what my tasks were and just inserting themselves into the industry. Oh yeah, I gotta push this 4 times, okay. So before I get into the main part of the union, I wanna go over these milestones. We're at the end of the 1900s. You get these Federation of Labor, the American Federation of Labor, all the craftsmen, carpenters and bootmakers are there, and they formed the American Federation. A British cigar maker, Gompers, was the person who did that. And parallel to the small craftsmen are the big unions, the oil, the steel, the automotive, the rubber, and they formed the CIO, which was the large unions. And they were fighting for 50 years until they figured out it was better to form the AFL-CIO. Let me get back to this. You had the legal underpinning started for unions in the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which was against Carnegie, Rockefeller, all these price fixers that had the market cornered. Not only did they have the consumer cornered, but the worker who worked at one steel mill didn't have much of a choice. They controlled the labor market outside and within their own industry. So the it was Federal Trade Commission back then, slapped in Congress accepted the Sherman Trust Act. The Clayton Act was it got rid of the restraint of trade, the conspiracy to restrain trade that had existed in the 1800s. So unions were now free of that moniker. They could strike now, whereby the strikes were illegal in the 19th century. Then there was violence there. I mentioned the Haymarket riots, which you might have heard in Chicago, where after a strike, everyone got together in a section in South Chicago. A bomb was thrown, people were killed. George Pullman had the Pullman cars. Anyone remember the Pullman cars? I don't know when they went away, but this guy, he wasn't very nice to his employees. The conductors on the train. He made them shacks on the south of Chicago near Gary, Indiana, and charged them a lot of money. They were like sharecroppers. The business went down. He cut their salaries. It's not a good situation. So the American Railway Union helped them strike. And once the strike happened, the National Guard came. A lot of people were killed. Same thing happened in Colorado, where John D. Rockefeller owned a big share of the coal company there, and he sent his Pinkerton guards. All through the 1800s, there were mercenary people to control the strikers. Wasn't nice. We had The Jungle, which is a book about meatpacking indiscretions, and the Department of Labor was formed under William Taft. And now here, underlined, is the big thing. The biggest positive thing in labor has been the Wagner Act. Senator Wagner in New York codified the right under the First Amendment, freedom of association to form a union, to collectively bargain, and the right to collective action too. So without these 3 things, I wouldn't be standing here today. It enables people who are fed up with their job to form and coalesce into a union without fear of retaliation. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't get fired, because we have people in our union that do this, but there's a penalty for it. It's an unfair labor practice, and you can get your job back with interest for that. So only the big guys have the temerity to fire you. Small organizations won't fire you. Recently, we've had some little blowback here, though. Taft-Hartley Act was sort of reaction to it. It prohibited wildcat strikes and union shops. In other words, you couldn't automatically be forced into a union. And what it also did was create right-to-work laws. Right-to-work laws are the following. It's kind of amazing. 27 states have said, if you join a union, you don't have to pay any dues. So, go to an ice cream shop and order an ice cream cone, you don't have to pay for the ice cream. So you can break your neck doing collective bargaining for these free riders, I call them. We call them free riders. And they won't give you any dues. So I cannot tell you how frustrating that is. The average union membership dues paying in private is about 70%. People pay their dues. So, running a union like this is difficult. You have a lot of prima donnas here. People are philosophically against your political thing. In our union, we have a political split, Democrats and Republicans. It's hard to juggle. Religious splits. we're here to help you get better wages. We're not here to solve your religious problems. We're not here to solve your political problems. So it's a narrow focus we have to help your job become better. The right to work. Janus is a similar thing with public sector. Right to work involves private employers. So I'm going to skip forward. Well, this is a nice slide. I just felt we needed a break because when I came, I'm not that old, but when I was started in the 70s, it was so nice because I could do no wrong. I was a family doctor and got my insurance money right away, either from the patient who got reimbursed me or directly from the insurance company under this McCarran-Ferguson exemption. And so the antitrust exemptions that you may or may not know apply to everybody except agriculture cooperatives, insurance companies, and baseball. So there's a crazy 3 exemptions on that. And McCarran-Ferguson's interesting because, I don't know if you know this, but McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, he was a senator and he helped the Marshall Plan rebuild Europe. And Truman was so grateful to him, he gave him a limited exemption, which means insurance companies could share data. And sharing data is not quite price fixing, but it's a very big advantage. So insurance companies were happy, I was happy, everyone was happy until Medicare and the HMOs arrived in the late 60s. And then that bifurcated people. Hospitals and doctors are a little bit competitive then. Part A is for hospitals, Part B is for doctors. So we're a little jealousy. That's when the unions, physician unions came around. We're 1972, SEI Doctors Councils, about same era. And the CIR, there's probably 3% of the doctors in the United States are unionized out of 800,000 doctors. So that's only 35,000, 30 to 40,000 doctors. It's a small segment, but it's growing. And so the other part is this third industrial revolution, which I consider like the massive amount of people coming out to get medical care, and the organizations with informatics and a lot of smart people who analyze the demographics of the patients, what they need, what they're promised, and how much money they can get in. And who's the utilizer, right? Older people, higher utilizers. Pregnant women, high utilizers. So all these people are punching numbers to see how much money they can take in and then give out to the people who work for them. And the people who work for them in the control and processing are, people like me who work for the, as providers. And, we're very well micromanaged, managed care, micromanaged care, I call it, to see if you're overutilizing and giving paradigms and protocols on what kind of drug you can give, how long can this person be in the hospital. I was telling Professor Melman today about the Wick line case, which you may or may not know, which was a woman who had a blood clot. It was in California. It was in California, and Dr. Polanski, poor Dr. Polanski, he says, "Oh, she should stay 8 days." And then the Medi-Cal said, "No, get her out. There's a blood clot, 4 days blood clot, 4 days blood clot." This is data versus knowledge. Dr. Polanski was right. She went home. She had her leg amputated. And so we went to the court. She sued Medi-Cal in California and won it. But then guess what? They appealed it, and they said Dr. Polanski had a better knowledge and should have known. He knew that 4 days wasn't enough, so they blamed Polanski. And that's the Wick line case. And it really goes to the point of there's very little liability for administrators who tell people not to do an MRI, not to do this test, kick them out. And that's the frustration that doctors used to have the voice when they're losing it, So it goes all the way to this, which is, what that is. So it's coming to your neighborhood as law. Well, you have Westlaw. I don't know what you're going to have now. You may have a robot here. We have a robot at UC Davis that goes in rounds. But, listen, I don't have Siri's head. I don't have her memory. She can tell me, or, the counterpart, what the diagnosis is quicker than this. And also have trends in disease, emerging diseases and viruses that come out. They can help with administration. AI can help with staffing, can help with insurance collection. It's $4 or $5 trillion going down, and you know, you can think what you want about artificial intelligence, but you know, my thought is it's a little bit scary as far as job security, and I don't know how you feel about it in the law, but it's something to be very careful about. In our contracts now, we're having artificial intelligence clauses. Like we want to be part, we don't want this taking our jobs over, and everybody should worry about it as far as I'm concerned. So now, here's the industrial age. You got you know, all the people coming in under Obama with the influx of ACA. You got 100,000, you know how many people are 100 years in this country? 100 years old, almost 100,000 are 100 years old. So you have a lot of people coming on for health care. You have all the efficiencies that I talked about on AI and robotics. And also you have the attitude of the doctors, which is very passive. Like, okay, you know, they're there, they go to med school, it starts in med school. I told Professor Millman about what I consider the, you know, tenderization of medical students. They're exhausted with a Krebs cycle, they'll never use it, exhausted with that. And then they go out and residency and they work 100 hours a week, and they're just, when they get out, they take the first job they can get and they sign a contract they don't understand. So it's kind of a setup, being a doctor. You know, you have your wits and become a lawyer. That's what I did. So you got Taylorism too, which, you know, that's what I'm mentioning. It sort of makes you passive. And look what this slide says. You may have seen this, but, you know, back in, I can't use this, but back in 1970, it was pretty close between administrators and hospital. And look what happened about 1985 or 90. They multiplied like rabbits. And now there's 3,300. This is 2009. It's even worse now. That's why it's $4 trillion, but I think it's $4.5 or $5 trillion, or 19% of our gross product is going to this big fat, you know, overblown industry called medicine. And I guess Elon Musk is going to fix that, right? You know, so who knows what he's going to do. But this is what I'm finally getting to you here. All the employment that's going on. So when I started out, it was like 30 or 50% employment. I have my own practice even now, by the way. But all the people that go to med school get $300,000 in debt. They're not going to open up a practice. They're going into one of the big organizations. And that's not good, because it used to be you go to the office, it's me and you. We talk it over, we have a relationship. And now you see the unholy trinity down here. You get the employer, the patient, provider. The employer promises the patient, you know, gym memberships and all the blood tests you want, and promises the world to get them to sign, right? And meanwhile, then they go to the doctor and say, can I have a gym membership? No. Can I have this test? No. Who told you that? Well, I got it in the brochure. And then you get in a fight. It's an unholy triangle. And that is the intersection of employment and the boss with something that used to be very sacred. You know, the doctor-patient relationship is not what it used to be. Okay, there's a doctor-patient relationship, a little story here. So that is down the Tropicana. They blew that up about a month ago, right? Does anyone see that Clint Eastwood movie, Every Which Way But Loose? You must have seen that. That's Clyde, okay? So Clyde, I walked into the Tropicana, see it? And he was there with a handler with a cigarette, and in one hand, a drink in the other. I said, I got to meet this guy, you know? And so they took it for $20. They took that picture. But it sort of reminded me of that, this last thing.
Where are you in that picture?
What?
Is that you in the picture?
Yeah, oh yeah, I look a little bit different, don't
Which one?
I? That's me on the left,
Okay.
in my better years. Thank you. That's 25 years ago. You know, he's the best looking up there. But who's the monkey? Is it the doctor or the patient? It's certainly not the administrator. You know, that's the sort of the allegory about this thing. I thought it was interesting. By the way, that's the urologist on the left, and he's not too happy, is he? Okay, so you got corporatization, and you got, you know, you got all these MBAs, sorry, lawyers. Everybody's up there that's smarter than the doctors. Doctors, you know, go in this with, I'm not saying all doctors are like that. Family doctors are. I'm a family doctor, so, I mean, you're sort of outnumbered and outmatched when you go into these things. And, you know, so what's somebody to do, huh? What are you to do? you got all these mergers, you know, you got, I didn't have in Ohio, so I used in Michigan. You got 3 organizations with 60% of the market, you know, you're stacked up against it. You don't know what to do. You're just $300,000 in debt. And so you're going to sign up with one of these mega organizations, and you'll take what they give you, right? They'll take what you give you. Why is that? Because they're dogs, and doctors are cats. No, sorry. Yes, that's right. Let me get that for. Yes, that's right. So they know, they go in packs. I mean, I'm saying that. There's a mindset that has caused this problem to go, right? We need to be, doctors as a profession need to have more of a pack mentality, as these guys, the MBAs, have. So that's what I tell people. And I'm organizing doctors into unions is like herding cats. And so that's the point of this slide. It's not easy. People are afraid. They're afraid to organize because the strike word, things like that. So how do I do this? So here's finally, we're getting to the point here that what's organizable under the National Labor Relations Act. You can organize if you are, you know, if you're a salaried employee, if you have a W-2 and you're an employee, a true employee, you can do this. If you're an independent contractor, you're out of luck. There's several tests that you do to prove independent contractor or not. I don't have the time to get into that, but you know, those are the tests we use. And W-2 is a pretty easy test. You get a W-2, you have tools. You know, there's several. Department of Justice has several criteria for determining whether you're an independent contractor. Having a W-2 is a pretty good jump to become an employee, and when you have that, you can organize into a union. Now, in 1999, the interns, before 1999, they were not. They were students. Residents were considered students, but a case in Boston City College, Boston City Hospital determined that interns and residents, they work 80 to 100 hours a week. My God, isn't that enough for you? You know, so they're unionizable. Salaried employees, they're unionizable. But if you're a manager and you can prove, you know, you have the ability to hire and fire people, then you are considered a manager supervisor. You're not unionizable. Back to this thing here, which is the, you know, the collective bargaining. This is really what the Wagner Act was about, and that is to come together and to do the dance of collective bargaining, which heretofore was not. You go in there, you get a job, you wouldn't negotiate. Still going on now. About 70% of our doctors now are employed, and they have the ability to ask for collective bargaining under the Wagner Act, right? And so what's that mean? It means, you know, you have a W-2, you're not a manager, and you can come together. If you can form a bargaining unit, and that's what we do, we go around the country and we find people in these different organizations that are fed up and burned out. You know, the suicide rate amongst doctors is #1 of all the groups in this country. It used to be dentists, but now doctors have the highest suicide rate, 400 a year. A lot of them are residents. They do bizarre, jump off buildings, do some strange things. But they're just burned out. They have, they don't know how to say no. And so it's a big problem. And, you know, the empowerment that a union gives is something that makes people feel a lot better about themselves and to control their destiny. And that's what a contract is. And that's what we do. We find bargaining units in, with people that are W-2 employees. We organize them, and then we do contracts. And what are the contracts? Well, the contracts are the classical collective bargaining, right? And that's the opening proposals, the responses, right? The two parties meet. And it's very amazing to see doctors who have been beaten down by their employers, and then they form a union, right? And they get 50% plus one. They have a vote. We try to, you know, get them up to do that. 50% plus one of those who vote, voila, National Labor Relations Board considers you for private doctors as as now a bargaining unit. And you can go and face your boss and be equal for that afternoon, that is. And then you go in there and you bargain with them. So we have the team opening proposals we have. Employer gives responses, and bargaining begins. It's hopeful that it goes to this left side, right? But usually doesn't, right? The temporary agreement doesn't. You have a lot of stalling, So it's an unfair labor practice if you stall, if you don't meet more than a month. Oh, we can't do it. We get this and that. No, you're stalling. So we're always, we got a very good law firm out in California, Rosenfeld firm, and we're on everybody every second to get them to the table in good faith. Good faith. That's the watchword of the National Labor Relations Act. Good faith bargaining, where you show up and you progress in a temporal way. And so we get up to the right. Over the left, though, on this side or to your right, you have something that is not that great. You have you present your issues that seem right for you, but the employer doesn't want to do it, and you get a last, best, and final offer from them, and you can either take it or leave it. You can reach a final agreement. What we usually don't. We go to impasse. Impasse is when both sides don't move an inch, and you've bargained your way. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it takes a few months. My personal feeling is, if you know what's going on, go right to the point. Go right to the point, because I hate stalling. Stalling is very expensive. I mean, some of you are going to be labor lawyers, and I hope you're ethical ones, because there's some that just see these two big, lucrative bodies, the employer and the doctors, and stall it out. And so we don't put up with that. There's nothing like calling the question, okay? So we tend to try to call the question, which is, are you going to move or not? And if they don't, we go to impasse. When impasse, we go to mediation and fact-finding. We get a federal mediator over who tries to go from room to room and say, well, they want certain hours, and they want a certain salary, and they want some time off, administrative time, grievances, and all that. And sometimes it works. We've only had 6 strikes in 52 years. But the interesting thing is, we had 1 strike in 1975, and we've had 5 strikes in the last 10 years. So the curve's going up. The curve's going up, and I just think, why is that? Why are people more prone to do it? I think for the reasons I just said. The stalling is an end unto itself, and we want resolution. The first contract can go. We had the contract in Los Angeles County for our doctors last 2.5 years. 2.5 years, and we settled it. We were on the verge of striking. We didn't. But this strike is 1975, and that's the first. Whoops, sorry. That's the first president of our union, Sanford Marcus, who's a surgeon out in San Mateo, California. Really cool guy. And it was about malpractice premiums for anesthesiologists. And they tripled under Jerry. Remember Jerry Brown? You all know Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown won when he did the first term. He's a young Jerry Brown. And then he was Jerry Brown 2 about 10 years ago. But Jerry Brown won. I don't know. He worked with the insurance companies and decided to jack up the malpractice rates. And that infuriated the doctors in California. Now, under the Wagner Act, you don't have to be in a union to have a collective action. You can strike without being a union. I don't know if you knew that, but these are anesthesiologists in California not in a union, and they did an elective slowdown, which means all the elective surgeries were postponed. Now, I'd like to hear your opinions on that when I finish this speech, which is, do you think that's unethical? Because that's what people do. Oh, you strike, you're unethical, you won't have a surgery. But let me tell you, it's people who needed the surgeries got it, okay? You needed some sort of plastic surgery, maybe you should wait a month, But nobody who needed it didn't get it. So I thought it was, we thought people who do this need to think hard about what's ethical or not, and it is a big deal. People think you're withholding care, and it's not right, and I think we're doing the right thing here. They got what they wanted in a month. This was a long strike, 1 month. This next strike here is UC, University of California. And what was that strike about? That was about unfair labor practice on data. They wouldn't fork over the data. University of California had a lot of money. They wouldn't give the doctors at University of California any raises. Oh, and weekend rates. They wouldn't pay them for weekends. So that was enough. That was an unfair labor practice because they withhold data. Now, strikes are in three versions. Unfair labor practices, where they can temporarily replace you, and economic strikes, which they can permanently replace you. So this was an unfair labor practice, and the doctors took off for 4 days, okay? And we resolved it in a week. But again, it was clinic doctors at UC. It wasn't really, the work was waiting for them when they came back, let's put it that way. And that's UCLA, the, priority student health. I think that we put a plane up. Student health, not UC wealth. So the University of California could afford this stuff, I see that plane up there. That's me with the nurses. So sometimes you have sympathy strikes, when, labor needs to help one another out. And so the nurses helped us out, we helped the nurses out. This is for breaks. Rested nurses pay, so they wanted breaks, and they didn't get them. Okay, Rob, where are you? This is Buffalo about 2 months ago. University.
More than 800 resident physicians at UB walking off the job. They plan on striking for 4 days today, day one. They're demanding better compensation, benefits, and working conditions. And we spoke with some of them striking outside Buffalo General today.
I am Amanda Duggan. I'm an MD.
When Amanda Duggan came to Buffalo for her residency, she knew she was going to be working hard, helping others get well, but she didn't know she would need medical treatment herself.
I got cancer last year, so I came to Buffalo not knowing that I was going to be sick. And I came here to serve the people of Buffalo. I didn't know that I was going to have to do that while being on chemotherapy.
Duggan said she continued to work long hours and didn't get the support she needed from her employer.
And even just taking an afternoon off to go see my oncologist turned out to be a very big deal.
Another big deal? Pay. Duggan is one of more than 800 UB resident physicians demanding better pay, benefits, and working conditions.
Okay, let's
I'm
go.
an MD and I'm a
Okay, thank you, Rob. So, wow, that's a pretty easy one. The chemotherapy, you can't have the afternoon off to go to your on-call. Come on. So everyone was very supportive. We got the state senator, we got senators, we got the mayor of Buffalo to come in. We put a billboard on the road to Buffalo with a picture of a surgeon with a knife, scalpel. Would you let him for $14.50 below minimum wage operate on you? So that was an easy one. So to me, I can go on, but sometimes the employers are not reasonable. They had a snowstorm. Oh, snowstorm. You know about snowstorms in Cleveland. You get the same ones in Buffalo. So they were in for 3 days marooned there, and they wouldn't give them an Uber a voucher. So this was, to me, something very easy. We're about to sign the contract next week. So it took 15 months to do this, but they're going from $59,000 to about $68,000. So it's a 20-something% raise. And they are living hand to mouth, right? So I just think some of this is very righteous stuff. And, people should, you say doctors go on strike. Nobody, we had 400 doctors out of 800 go out for 4 days. I was there. And everybody got covered. The University of Buffalo had to pay for temporary help. And, they're making millions off the residents. I don't want to tell you. But each resident's $150,000 for the University of Buffalo. And there are 833 of them. So you multiply that, I think it's $120 million. Somebody do the math. They had plenty of money. They just wanted to hoard it. So they gave them a raise, which they deserved. So some of this stuff is really easy to swallow. I want to get into one more slide before we can get some questions here. But this is what we're fighting over, contracts, right? So, I didn't, I don't know if I told you, but to get into a bargaining unit, you have to have a community of interest. Like the residents of Buffalo are paid by the same employer. They see the patients, their interchange is within the same hospital, so they are a community of interest. If you get 50% plus one to say, I want a union, voila, you have a union. And then you fight for a contract, which in this case took 15 months at Buffalo. Usually takes at least a year. But here's what you want. You want the recognition up on the upper right that you are indeed the exclusive representative. It used to be that you'd had several unions representing the same group, and that was too confusing. So we're exclusive representatives for probably 40 or 50 bargaining units right now. You have stewards, which are the shepherds, the sheepdogs, right? They listen to the members' complaints, and if there's any violation of the contract, the steward will inform us and we'll file grievances, which is down on the left side. The grievances have, steps. You file an informal grievance. You talk to the person, why did you deny his vacation? I don't know. And then you go to the second and third step. You can go to arbitration on some of these clauses. You have rights that we have to access our members via business email if it's about ministerial things like, we're having a meeting next week and you come. And we can go into the work premises to talk to them, but the employer rights are huge, which is the ability to hire, fire, retool the schedules, things like that. We also have a legal representation fund, so we love you guys. We have David Rosenfeld out in California who's spent his whole life in labor and is very good. And we give money. We give $1,000 for a second opinion to see if the case is worth anything. Somebody yelled at me, it's not worth it. Or somebody fired me for the color of my skin, that's worth it. And so we have, we have discrimination, non-discrimination clauses, of the usual sex, race, sexual orientation. And we have hours of work. Up in Seattle, I don't know if I showed you that one, but in Seattle, we had an end of day problem where the urgent care doctors in Seattle wanted to go home after 12 hours, right, from 8 to 8. And then all of a sudden someone comes in at 7:59 p.m., a family of 4 people with a flu. And then you got to see them with no money. You go home at 9:30, and they were sick of being used like that. So we fashioned a better way to triage patients. So that was a success. Just cause termination. If I don't like a joke you made, and I'm your employer, I could fire you for that. But that's not the case with just cause. You have to have notice. You have to have the punishment fit the crime. And, you have to know what you're being accused of. So we will always put a just cause in there to prevent arbitrary and capricious terminations or discipline. Holiday leaves are important, right? We have paternity leave, FMLA. We have the ability for people to go out, on paid leave. In California, there's different states. We're in different states. We're in California, Washington, New Mexico, Washington, D.C., and New York, and one other place, Colorado, right? And so we have, we just have these different laws here. Let's see, health and safety issues during COVID. We wanted the ability to speak out. One of the doctors got fired. I was telling Max about this fellow in the ER who was complaining about no PPE. They fired him. And so he's on a crusade now. You got to speak out for your patients. I mean, doctors are closer DNA-wise to patients than administrators. That's my assumption. I mean, my wife, ex-wife, was a hospital administrator. So I had a lot of interesting talks with her well into the night about what the rights are and, who doctors are. And, we're mostly nice people, and we're not, grubby or anything. They burn out. This burnout's a real thing. It affects everyone. And so a happy doctor is a good doctor, and that's the premise of all of us, of why you want to take care of these people, why there's a fight between administrators with $4.5 trillion, giving the doctors probably 10 or 10% now, usually, of what they do. And back in the day when I was there with the insurance company, we were well reimbursed. But now, some of the doctors coming out and they're getting very lowballed. They're very lowballed. making less than a lot of people are. And so they're burnout material, you know. So, you know, for people who are there for a while, transfers and layoffs are a big deal. And we have our clauses in our contract about the orderly layoffs and transfer. Professional judgment, huge. And so this is one of the biggest things we have. And that is, we want the same, not an MBA, not somebody who doesn't roll up their sleeves and see patients. We want the ability to say that. Okay, what does that mean? So we have a medication to treat MAT program with Suboxone. You know what Suboxone is? Suboxone's an opiate substitute for all the stuff that's going on in this country, all the epidemics. You give a low-level Suboxone, and it takes the edge off. You can stop somebody from overdosing. So we were in the prison system in California where there's 95,000 inmates. And they said all the primary care doctors, including family practice, will now take and give Suboxone to anyone who says they're an opiate addict. Guess how many said they were an opiate addict? 18,000 of the inmates out of 95,000. I took an opiate once. Can I have some Suboxone? Well, they sell it. They do all sorts of mischievous things. So we protested like, what are you doing? This is too big. And so our professional judgment, we had a fight 4 years ago. I went in there and I said, this is, mischief here. This is mischief. And so it took 4 years, but we just settled it last month for $13.9 million to pay back the primary care docs who had inadequate training. So that's what unions can do. And, I know it's all money, but, we're still working on this thing. It's a work in progress. Peer review, which you all know that. There's got to be just peer review. Retirement benefits, which are a big deal. We're a big deal for the Buffalo residents. Contracting out is also big because there's usually huge vacancies. We had 50% vacancies in our psychiatrists, the state of California. And the state was hiring contractors at 2 and 3 times as much money. One contractor made $131,000 in 1 month. And it was about $120 million wasted taxpayer money, which I testified in Sacramento, like, wow, $1 billion in 10 years. I said, can you pay these guys a little more so they go in the prisons? It's not that great of a place to work, So, they demonstrated, we've had demonstrations. It's a more active kind of a union than it was 10 or 15 years ago. Telehealth is just like AI. It's coming, it's there, we're not going to fight it. We just have clauses. We're at the table when they discuss AI and telehealth, so we have clauses in there. Just culture is about the systems having a problem, not the doctor being the problem. If somebody gives the wrong pill to someone, maybe the label was wrong, maybe the system is wrong. And so it's not accusing someone right off the bat, one of our members. It's looking at the system and a just culture. So that's my quickie thing. And the final slide is on the right. This is way back, when you're all alone and a little green frog boiling over and weakening, getting orders from people. And yes, sir, I'll hop to it. And then you realize you're doing bad things that are business people are telling you what to do to people. And they're not based on professional judgment. And so you'd rather be on the right, to your right. You'd be, together with people who have power. And that's what unions are. Unions are about power, and physician unions are everybody's concern, I think. Everybody, patients too. So that's it. I'd like to have some questions.
So we have a few minutes for questions, and then we will invite you to come upstairs for a reception, although Dr. Bussey has to leave to catch a plane, but we can stay on.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I have 2 quick questions, I think. So one is, what percentage of doctors are unionized right now?
3.5%.
Just 3 or 3.5%. Another question is, given that we have such a physician shortage, why aren't doctors able to negotiate by themselves, for good conditions and good pay?
Well, I ask that myself every day. They're passive. They're that Taylor thing. Frederick Taylor. He knew what he was dealing with people were afraid of their jobs. They're so grateful during the interview process for the state. Oh, I'm going to get a job. I have $320,000 in debt. I'll take it. Wait a minute, I didn't even tell you what it was. So they don't negotiate from a position of strength. They're not the world's toughest people. They're givers. Well, yeah, they're just not good business people. And so they will, they have seminars on how to, the employer's pretty smart. I mean, they're all smart people. And, they're not good negotiators, is what I'm saying. And when they go in by themselves and don't have either a rep or lawyer or another union, I've had laws now in California, we pass hiring laws. So the other thing the unions do is sponsor laws to address your question, like you're going in like a sheep to the slaughter when you go into a group of two people. I didn't mention the Weingarten rights here, but it's the same thing. Anytime you're disciplined under this law called Weingarten, you have the ability to get somebody with you. You get Max Mellman here to sit next to me while I'm being, interrogated about something. You just have a totally different, doctors are loners and they're not good at asking for help. So that's the short answer to you. I don't think they're good negotiators by themselves, but if they join a union, they are. Any other? Yeah.
Wait, you need the microphone? It's up there. So, yeah.
Oh, you're next, I'm sorry.
Did I get to answer my question? Sure. Okay, thank you. What relationship do you have with the SEIU? And the reason why I ask, the SEIU organized the residents at George Washington Hospital. They have been unable to reach a contract for 2 years. They've actually been more active in ceasefire protests, which is political, rather than working on achieving a contract. So do you have a relationship with them?
Yeah, we have our friendly competitors, Ford and Chevy, Lexus and
So basically, would you be willing to try to knock them out and take the lead role?
No, there's 800,000. There's like 800,000 licensed doctors. There's probably 550,000 market share. So I think there's enough for everyone. Sometimes you compete in the same unit. The dues. Yeah, it's Ford and Chevy, Lexus and Audi. Whatever you say it. There's room enough. There's room enough. But I just think this is I think the bigger problem is what you said, is 3% of people are willing to raise their hand. Can I join a union? They're all scared. They're all scared to say, I'm talking to a union person. And of course, the National Labor Relations Act, Section 7, has protections on any concerted activity, including a phone call to me. I said, you're protected under that. If someone says, tell me about it, we'll sue their ass, And so it's just a cultural fear that doctors are not fighters. And we need fighters, and because it's a very important profession. And why be subservient to the people on the 40th floor who don't have to go to sleep worried about giving the wrong pill to somebody, or didn't tie the artery up enough? It's just another case and another paycheck from the insurance company. But I'm going to tell you, I work I'm still working. I got patients tomorrow. That's why I'm taking the plane back. But it's a just different ballgame. It's a different ballgame. And these doctors need protection. And if SEI wants to do that, and you got 550,000 people, you have a relationship with SEIU?
No, I don't. I've represented employers in negotiations against them, but
yeah.
In this case, they're not focused on getting a contract for the residents who desperately want a contract. They're focused on ceasefire protests.
Oh, that stuff. Oh, that stuff. Okay, we have the same thing. And so that's the good point you made, because during our triennial 2 weeks ago, we had someone stand up with the same thing. I would like a statement on the Gaza ceasefire thing. I was saying, oh, listen, you know what? It's hard enough to keep people together. It's hard enough to keep doctors together. Hard enough to get Republicans and Democrats together. Hard enough to get Jews in Gaza together. But why do we have to do this? Let's just work on it. Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to listen to me, or Hamas not going to listen to me, not going to listen to this union. It's bigger fish than we have. Philosophically, why don't I bring up some impossible thing? Like, you talk about abortion, you can talk about other political stuff, but let's keep this thing together. We're here to serve you, not to duck the issue. Smoking is bad, dirty water is bad. There's a lot of other things that are easier to agree on than something fractious like this. So yes, I understand what they're doing, then, you know, if they want to do it, that's fine. But,
We have a student question.
yeah.
here.
Oh,
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
So I am one of the students in Professor Hoffman's class regarding health law, and we hear a lot about burnout and getting a little bit more of that insight. How are universities, if they are, how are medical schools or residency programs educating students or doctors or soon-to-be doctors on their rights? I know that they learn about basic healthcare laws and regulation, but you know, you often hear that they don't have financial literacy or things like what you just talked about.
yeah, you know, it's a great question because you can say and you can have a lecture about, come on out, tell me if you got depressed, tell me if you tried to slit your wrist, tell me if you're breaking up with your girlfriend or boyfriend and you're in a deep depression. But people, it's not that easy to go and do it because you just fear that there's still a fear in being open about it. And how do people do burnout? I think joining a union is one way to do it. But there is a natural resistance to bare your soul. I mean, it's all good to offer this stuff. It's all good.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I was trying to say, like, do you think that could be partially in the curriculum?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
push for that?
Oh,
Okay.
sure. I mean, it starts at med school because what you're saying is right. You go in there like an innocent person wanting to help people. You're embroidered with stuff. You go home. You can't handle it. I went through it. I went 100 hours. And you just need to be treated better like a human. These guys in Buffalo, 100 hours, it's too much. It's too much. You're lucky to have these people. There's a doctor shortage, Treat them good. Treat them good and give them the benefit of the doubt.
All right, we are out of time. I just want to thank Dr. Bussey again. And we have a little gift for you, which is which we can mail to you, so you don't have to carry it heavy on the plane. And by the way, on February 21st and February 22nd, the Law Medicine Center is hosting a national forum for medical students around the country, and they can join us virtually or in person, and we are going to talk about just that, how in medical school, what should you know about what you're going to encounter, what legal protections there are, what their flaws and weaknesses are, what you can do to try to protect doctors better, including unionization. So, maybe you